Hi, I'm Ian the Green. Um, I was laureled a little over a year and a half ago now. Um, and I am, as far as I know, the first person to get laureled for ink making in the SCA. In fact, I don't know of anybody else who has been yet, but that's okay. We'll get there. Um, I know there's a lot of people here, and I would like to go ahead and say, hey, what kind of questions do you have? What do you want to know about ink making? Go ahead, speak up, or put it in chat, please.
I know it's not the topic for tonight, but I am very interested in carbon-based inks. So the lamp-based inks and the
Mhm.
carbon black inks.
Well, tonight's class is actually inks, and then we're gonna drill down and look at Brazilwood ink specifically. But it's not. We can discuss the other stuff too. Okay, so carbon-based inks. Do you need to add anti-mold things to keep the ink from molding? That's another one. All right. Preservation ink, longevity, how the ink works over time. Okay. Well, let's start with the lamp blacks, or more accurately, as you said, carbon inks. Not all carbon inks are lamp black inks. Of course, all lamp black inks are a carbon ink. Why do we call it a carbon ink? Well, because it uses carbon, black carbon, to create the color that you need. In this case, black for the writing. And there's a lot of ways to do it. The simplest way to do it is burn something, crush it up, make it nice and smooth, add vinegar, maybe a little water, get it to the consistency you like. Generally, you do that by adding gum arabic or some other type of gum, um, and write with it. Congratulations, you've made a carbon black ink. And it is the simplest form of ink to make. And anybody who wants to say, well, that's not any good, we still have we have some of that stuff going all the way back to the Egyptians written on papyrus. It is, however, not people can go ahead and scrape that and write over it, and you'll never know. It is not tamper proof. The question is what proportions of carbon black ink? Well, for the carbon black ink, whatever works. I know that sounds a little bit bad and kind of trite, but quite honestly, I haven't seen a single recipe out there for carbon black inks because that's the method. You get it as dark as you want that way, or as light as you want it that way, and then there's a lot of trial and error to it. I tend not to make it very much because I really enjoy working with iron gall ink. Lamp black inks, you take an oil of some kind. Sometimes it's fat, sometimes it's a seed oil. It doesn't really matter. And you put a vessel over it. These days, you can put a baking sheet over it. Copper metal bowls or pots were typically used. Why copper? Well, because that's what they made the pot out of. And it doesn't have pores, whereas anything made out of clay is going to have pores on it, and so it's going to be harder to get the stuff out of it. I see that. I'll answer that one in a bit. Um, and so you wanted to use a metal, and copper is typically what it was. It wasn't that copper is a better metal than other metals. It's just that if you're going to have a cooking vessel, copper was the easiest thing to use. Um, can you make lapback ink out of beeswax? I'll answer that one too. So what you do is you burn that thing and you catch the smoke as it's coming up. And as you can imagine, it takes a long time and a lot of pots before you're going to get enough to make ink out of it. Um, you brush that off. Usually they like to use a feather and they put it in a collection pan and they do it all over again. Typically they would do this overnight and they would hang up 20 or 30 pots if they're going to make ink. as a regular thing if you're an ink maker. Your own ink at home, obviously, you wouldn't need to do that. And then you're going to, and it's an oil based, so it's not just carbon anymore. It's carbon with leftovers, and so there's going to be a little bit of oil. As you know, oil and water, they tend not to like each other. They tend to separate out, and so you need to get a suffocant. And a suffocant is just something that makes it easier for the water and oil to come together. Is the simplest way to explain it. And what they used was ox gall. Ox gall is not the gall of an ox, and it generally isn't an ox. It's the stomach acid, stomach lining, for lack of a better word, that comes from regurgitation from a cow. So, and today you can go to most art stores and get it. It's yellow, and it's very, very refined. And if you flick it, it absolutely destroys any surface tension on the water. So be careful about that. Surface tension on water is something that really helps ink move. But having none of it can make it move faster. Water is a complicated issue, actually, when you get into it. And then you mix it. Now, there's an Eastern version and a Western version. In the East, they turn it into that is how they make their. Wow, my brain does not want to pull up words tonight. I'm sorry. Sumi
Stick ink? Yeah, Sumi ink.
Yeah, stick ink, Sumi ink. And there are various kinds that you can make. Yep, exactly. Thank you. And it, sometimes they need it with their feet. Sometimes they add pine resin in it. Sometimes they use the pine resin to make the smoke. Some kind of clay. But trying to get a recipe for how to make that is really difficult because even today, they're very secretive about their particular recipe.
Mm-hmm.
So I've looked into it. I tried to study it. I tried to get stuff. It just wasn't worth my time. It can be worth your time. It just wasn't something that I was. Yes, one pot over one lamp. I mean, you could set up more than one lamp. I'm being asked, and use a cookie sheet, and you'll catch more.
Yep.
Whatever works for you.
I don't want to
So some of the questions I need to look at chat and because I haven't remembered all of them. All right. Do you need to add anti-molding to keep ink from molding? Well, depends on the ink. I will ask you, why do you want to keep the mold out? What is about the mold that makes that's so bad? And the reason I ask that question is because study after study after study that's come out has shown that mold on any kind of ink makes the ink blacker, smoother, and comes out with a color that is more desirable. Now, there are very good reasons to not have mold in your ink, and some of that can be, well, I'm allergic. And I think that is always the right answer. If you're allergic, don't do it. Now, that said, most of the time, the molding should be done in the ink making process as opposed to after it's ink. But whatever works. I've had mold show up in my inks, and I punch it down to the bottom, and I get a much blacker, much richer ink that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm used to fountain pens where if you get mold in ink, you just throw the bottle away and hope that you can sanitize the pen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I'm like, why do you want to get rid of the mold? And that's one of the very good reasons right there. Typically, most people like to use clove oil, and I'm not against that. Once you add oil to a water-based ink, it's going to, or it can, I should say, it can create rings around the letter or around where the ink is gone. And so just be aware not to put in too much so that doesn't happen. You do get a halo effect. Preservation of ink, longevity, how ink works over time. That really depends on the ink. Brazilwood ink that we're going to be discussing is not light fast. And interestingly, it is color fast, but it's not light fast. So we need to discuss that anyway. What is light fast? What is color fast? Light fast is if you shine a light on it or it stays in the sun, is it going to lose color? And that's light fastness. Color fastness is if it's in the dark and it never sees the light of day and I pull it out in a year, is it going to be as bright in a year as it was when it got put down on the page, or in 10 years or in 20 years? So color fastness is, are you going to lose the color no matter what? And light fastness is, if it's in the light, are you going to lose it? And so those two things. So Brazilwood ink is not light fast, but it is very color fast. You can see some red here. And I can't tell you that that's Brazilwood ink because you can't tell from looking at something on a page most of the time. But I will tell you that there's Brazilwood ink that is that kind of red that you will see in manuscripts that are from roughly this time period and from before. So it's lasted hundreds of years because books get closed, and unless you're reading them, they don't get exposed to light. And so it's color fast and it's just fine for the purposes. If you're going to put it on a single sheet of paper and put it up in a place where it's going to get direct sunlight or it has a light bulb shining in it all the time, it's going to fade over time because it's exposed to light. Photons and color don't always get along. It's kind of a weird thing. So how do you preserve your ink over time when it's not on a sheet of paper or parchment or whatever your substrate is? And the answer is, again, depends on the kind of ink. Iron gall ink, just close it. Get it sealed off. If you want to put it in a light fast container, you can, inkhorn, amber colored bottles, something that just doesn't let the light through. That's fine. It's not going to help it any. It's not going to hurt it any. On the other hand, Brazilwood, yeah, that's what you want to do. You want to put it in one of those. So the light fastness, because it's not that light fast, and yes, it will kill it in the bottle. I have iron gall ink that I made 2010 that is still usable. So how long does it last? About that long so far. Of course, on page, we know it lasts hundreds, if not thousands of years. So there are other colored inks out there. And it just really, each and every one's going to be a little bit different, but the best way to do it, no matter what, is in a cool place, not cold, not hot, just a regular, 60 to 75 degrees in a container that doesn't allow light in. And that should keep it as long as it's going to keep it. What are those time spans? I honestly don't know. And I don't know if there's been any studies done on it. I have over 200 academic papers, and I haven't seen one that has covered how long you can store ink. Doesn't mean it's not out there, just I haven't seen it yet. Somebody hasn't ever made ink and they're wanting to learn, great. You're going to learn tonight a little bit. Can walnut ink be made more opaque? Okay, the simple answer to that is yes. The longer answer is walnut ink is not a period ink.
Nope.
That's not bad in any way, shape, or form. Neither is speedball ink. It's fine. It doesn't mean you can't use it. In fact, I've made walnut ink. It usually comes out with a gorgeous brown. I absolutely love it. It's better than any other brown ink that I've ever made. And they didn't do it in period. I've had several conversations with the British Library. I've had some communication with the French National Library. And some of their experts from the Middle East as well, depending on, that was from the British Library. And there is no known recipe out there for walnut ink at all There is no known use of it so far in the analysis of inks that have been done. And the reason that one of the things that, now, of course, we don't know why, we don't know what was inside their brain. But one of the reasons that is more likely than not is that they would use walnut to dye clothes, and it's not very color fast. And so it would fade. And they're writing for it, they want their writing to last for a very long time on average, especially for official documents or books. So they just wouldn't have used it, is the thinking. As far as we know, it's never been used. You can use it. And the irony is, all they had to do was add iron sulfate or some other iron to it, and it would have made it permanent. And they're already doing that with iron gall ink, or, so oops. So that would be how you make it more opaque, by the way, is just add some iron to it, generally iron sulfate. Why iron sulfate? Because iron sulfate is absorbed almost instantly into water, and it's the easiest way to get iron into water. Otherwise, you have to do a lot of soaking, a lot of over a long period of time. The other option, of course, is you can heat it to cherry red and dip it in, and the iron ions will fly out into the water. And yes, there are recipes that ask you to do that. So iron sulfate's a lot easier to get a hold of. Pretty much almost every greenhouse or plant store is going to have iron sulfate there for you. It helps make your plants look greener. It gets them the iron they need. And the sulfate helps too. So, can you make lamp black ink out of beeswax?
No.
I'm sorry? You can add beeswax to lamp black ink. Can you make it out of beeswax? I don't know. First of all, let me start off with that one. I've never done it. I don't think it would be a very good ink unto itself if I'm just making lamp black and melting beeswax and adding it to it.
No, I'm talking about beeswax candles to create this soot.
Oh, that way. I'm sorry. I apologize. I should have read it that way.
Instead of using tallow candles, which would be beef fat, then you would use beeswax candles to create the soot.
Instead of oil or tallow or something like that. Yeah. That makes perfectly good sense. I should have gone that route. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate it.
That's okay.
I still have to answer I don't know, because I haven't done that one yet, and I don't know anybody who has. I can see that it's going to have some of the same problems that you're going to have with oil. And it really is going to depend on how clean that candle is burning. Because if too much wax gets up there with it, it's just not going to, the black is just not going to go into solution. And I don't really care how much oxgal you add to it. You're going to need to get something that's going to break down the wax so it'll work inside the water anyway. I assume, but don't know, that oxgal would do that. So yeah, that sounds to me like a fun one to try. I actually have some beeswax candles, but honestly, I don't know. I think it'd be worth trying.
I feel like that's an expensive fat to be making ink with.
It is. I have some period style candles that were made for me by a gentleman in the Middle Kingdom. And I'm like, look, I was a scribe. If I'm a scribe, I can afford to get the good candles. Because I'm the rock star of bookmaking as a scribe. You're getting paid very well in period. And so you would get them because they also burn cleaner and provide a brighter light, and they don't flicker as much for internal reasons. Right. They don't spit stuff at you usually either. But they're also not self-trimming. So you have to trim them. And that gets interesting when you get focused on your writing. So if you're going to make if you're going to use a beeswax candle, I would recommend using one with a modern wick that is self clipped, that'll just fall over instead of getting a really long wick on it, because it'll burn a foot high if you let it, or whatever.
Doesn't the beeswax burn cleaner that way? You don't get the soot.
All candles are going well. All candles made from the period time are going to have some kind of smoke coming off of them. I can't, not being an expert on candles, I can't tell you that it won't be there. I know when I have burned my period style candles, there is soot coming. Well, the black smoke coming up. It is less than a tallow candle as well.
And some of the soot is from the wick.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So the longer your wick, or the more untrimmed your wick is, the more soot you also tend to get off of it.
That has been my experience. Now, my experience is, in that particular case, anecdotal. Anecdotal meaning my experience and my experience only. It is not scientific. And not to, it is a point of data, but it's not the answer. All right. So what else? Yep. Winsor Newton Oxgall for about $18 a bottle. You don't need to use very much. That's coming from, I'm not going to say because it's put in here, but if that person wants to identify themselves, they're welcome to. But yeah, no, Oxgall, it's not very much at all. A couple of drops. For fountain pen ink or other inks, you need to avoid mold in it, absolutely. And thus, good ink hygiene. Good ink hygiene is an interesting thing. And I'll let somebody else deal with that. Hang on real quick. My child needs.
So while he is away, I put the note in about ink hygiene, and mostly it's about not putting ink back in the bottle when you have used it in a pen. Decant what you need and then use that and then discard the leftover. But don't dip into your original bottle or redispense old ink into your original bottle, and your ink will last longer.
And that's for fountain pens?
That is for fountain pen ink.
Okay. Yeah, because dip pen ink, go figure, you're going to dip repeatedly.
Right.
That's a good thing to know, because I didn't know that about fountain pens.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to empty a fountain pen back out into its bottle. You're just asking to put problems in it. And you're not saving that much ink. It's a couple milliliters.
And I don't know this, but I'm going to assume that the reason for that is microbes are in the air. Yep. And the more you collect, the more problems you can have.
Right.
All right. Somebody asked, do you buffer iron gall ink so that it doesn't damage the ground or etch your nibs? No, I don't. Okay. You can. Eggshells, by the way, are perfectly good, or ground up cuttlebone, or pretty much any calcium-based thing. Is that a period answer? They didn't worry about it, although you will occasionally find recipes that include it. But the reason that they're including it is not to temper it. They think it does something else. What they are doing is tempering it. But they didn't know that. So why don't I buffer it? I have made ink with a pH. By the way, anything less than 7 is acidic. Anything over 7 on the pH scale, from 7 to 14, is a base. And our rainwater today is typically a pH of 5, whereas typically in period it was more close to 7, that neutral pH. Lemon juice has a pH of around 2.5. So you kind of you see how things are there. You can pull up pH scales if you want to. I have made ink as low as 2.3 and as high as 5.6 on the pH scale. And the higher the pH on that, it doesn't get as dark. And part of the reason for that is that there's less ability for the iron in iron gall ink to interact with the acid, and so therefore you get less black. That's not saying that the ink has to be more acidic. It's just there's a point at which it's too little. Yes? Okay, I thought somebody wanted to ask a question. I apologize. So also modern nibs, when I say modern, I mean anything made after 1980. I don't know about before. Modern nibs don't etch. They stain, but they will not get etched by iron gall ink. If they are, you're soaking the pen in it or you're leaving the pen in it, at which point water's going to ruin it too. I mean, it's just water. Iron gall ink, when it dries, is not acidic anymore because it's dry. It can't interact. Those molecules are not interacting and moving around. Technically, yes, it's still acidic, but it has no way to interact and react unless moisture comes into the question. And so we have manuscripts from 300 AD. In fact, the most complete Bible that we have ever found is from like 312 AD, 370, I can't remember. It's in the 4th century. Written entirely in iron gall ink. It has absolutely no ink burn through or ink corrosion. And for those people who don't know, ink burn through, ink corrosion is when the letters start to eat out the substrate or the writing surface or the ground underneath it, and you end up having holes in the shape of letters. The Library of Congress in the United States has come to the conclusion that it's not just an ink problem. There has to be intervening factors that come from the substrate or the writing surface and the environment in which the book has been in. But unto itself, the ink is not going to go through. Does iron gall ink meet archival standards? Technically, no. On the other hand, one of the standards for archival ink is that it has to last at least 500 years. Yeah, iron gall ink has that. But yes, it does come with its own problems and issues. Yes, we do have manuscripts with ink burn through. However, we have hundreds of thousands of other manuscripts that don't have any. So the issue isn't just the iron gall ink. So no, I don't buffer it. Please talk about the consequences of shaking ferrous inks. Not all iron inks or ferrous inks are iron gall ink. In fact, one of the papers that I have is not all iron inks are iron gall. A lot of them are, most of them are, but not all of them. Here's the thing. The reason that iron gall ink is black is because the iron molecules have rusted. Now, when I say rusted, that's not quite accurate. It has oxidized. There are many different forms of oxidization. When we say rust, we think of that red, corrosive stuff that gets on iron and you have to get rid of it or it's going to eat through the metal. And it's bad for our purposes. That's not good. On the other hand, anybody here have cast iron skillets, cast iron pots, and they haven't been enameled? They're black. But iron's not black. Iron's a silvery colored metal. Why is that black? Well, because it rusted or oxidized. The black for iron is very stable. It is not going to continue to corrode. In fact, tannic acid is used by many museum conservatories on their iron stuff, so that so it ensures that they get that black coating that's going to help protect it and be stable so it doesn't get the red stuff. Why they do it, how they do it, not my job, not a conservator. but that's where it's coming from, is the acid and the iron molecule coming together, but also oxygen. And so inside the water, there's, it's H2O, 2 hydrogens per 1 oxygen. And you would think that would make a lot of oxygen available to it. No, that oxygen is bound up with a hydrogen. There are oxygens that are out there floating around, but they're rare. And as soon as it comes in contact with air, of course, it's going to make that black color and be absolutely. And that's one of the fun things about iron gall ink, is it can go on clear and then darken and become black, and it kind of feels like magic. If you take that same bottle and you shake it, you're introducing air into the solution or into the ink. So now you have the iron ink particles that are popping up and they're turning black, and well, they're going to end up being heavier than the water that they're in, and they're going to sink to the bottom. And they're not going to get absorbed back in. So what you have just successfully done is make your black ink lighter. You're making it more gray, because that stuff that's down at the bottom isn't going to get picked up. So shaking your iron gall ink is a no-no, but if you're a scribe and you've ever used modern ink, the first thing you do when you pick up a bottle is shake it. Don't do that with iron gall ink if you want it to stay black. That's the short version. Have I ever made any sepia inks? No, I have not. Sepia inks, interestingly enough, sometimes came from a single natural source.
Right.
And I don't have access to any of those. Interestingly enough, squid ink and I think cuttlefish, I don't remember if that's right, but they do actually use their ink and have milked them for their ink. And those, interestingly enough, can be very sepia. But I haven't made a sepia ink. Yeah. All right. So I've spent 40 minutes talking about all this other stuff, and I hope it's been helpful. Yeah, I agree. In the notes it said, we really need warnings on iron gall ink not to shake, because I've ruined several before I had told this person that in previous classes. All of my ink that I send out does come with that warning. I haven't made ink to sell in a long time, and I don't know if I will again anytime soon. However, I have no problem giving it away. I had somebody in Canada who was like, hey, can I buy a bottle of your ink? I got this group and we wanted to try it out. And I'm like, sure, okay. And they paid for a bottle of ink and some feathers and things like that. And what I sent them was 5 bottles of ink, 20 or 30 feather quill pens, and I think 2 bottles of Brazilwood ink. I was never making the ink I never made the ink to make money. I made money off of selling ink so that I could make more ink so I could give away more of it. And life right now, really for the last 5 years, 3 years specifically, haven't really let me have the time to make it for sale anymore. So, but I still give it away if I can. If we want to do a light sensitive test on a gifted bottle of ink, how long should we let the test run in light? So light sensitivity tests are interesting. If you have industrial or commercially available light sensitivity testing things, they'll tell you how to use them. I don't need to. If you want to do the light fast test that I was told to do by my first Laurel, I've had 4, it's as simple as take whatever the color is that you're using. It can be your paint or your inks. Draw out a line, and just, you want to make it, as long as you want. And then you're going to cover parts of it, and you're going to use, whatever width you want, aluminum foil or some other very opaque thing that's easy to take off. And you want to cover that in sections. And so you write the date on the first section that you leave open, and you stick it in a window that gets the most sun. And then a week later or a month later, depending on how you want to break it up, you can pull off the next one, write the date on that. An equal time later, pull off the third one, the fourth one, however far you go. Make sure you date them. Now you have a clearly visible line that will show you very clearly how light fast something is over the time period that you started and finished. If you want to do a light sensitivity test, how long should you run it? If it is a colored ink, generally I would say a month, no more than 2 months would be necessary, because colored inks tend to be not light fast. That doesn't mean they aren't. Some of them are very light fast, but they tend to not be light fast. And so if it's not going to be light fast, it'll show you that within a 2-month time period most of the time. If it's a black ink, I could go as long as a year. So because black is what happens when black degrades? What color does it become? Well, it takes a lot of work to make black disappear once it's on the written page. So I would go up to a year, but you can start with shorter ones as well. I hope that answered that question. 43 minutes. All right. Making Brazilwood ink is what was going to end up being the focus. That is a 50-minute video, if I remember right. Let me see. Nope, it's a 20-minute video on a 50-minute class. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to go over a little bit. Is that going to be okay with people?
Yep.
It's always
All right.
good.
We don't care how long you go.
Thank you. All right. So let me share my screen. You know, that was the wrong thing to do first. All right. Share this screen. That window. Share. In theory, you should be seeing Making Brazilwood ink. Is that what people are seeing?
I am not. Oh, there we go.
All right. It took a little time, but it showed up. Okay, good. All right. That gets moved. No, it doesn't. Okay. Make that bigger. All right. So this is one that this is Iron Gull ink that I made April 26th of 2020. 2024-26. That's the batch number. Makes it easy for me to know when something was made. And yes, I was honorable Lord at the time. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and watch the video, because the video is very, very straightforward. There are some mistakes. I'll stop the video every once in a while and correct it. Because no matter how good you are, there's always something you're going to learn later, and which means that the information you knew before wasn't as accurate or was completely inaccurate. And that's okay. That's just part of the learning process. There we go. I'd like to invite you to join me in a journey into making red Brazilwood ink. The red inks were used. All right, I'm going to pause that. Are people hearing it?
It was faint.
Don't forget to share video sound when you click before you share.
I think that was what I did. So we're going to try and fix that.
You probably need to unshare.
That's what I'm working on. Yep, I didn't hit share sound. Unshare. I'll do that. Share sound. Now I'll go back to that and share. And where did you go?
Got it. Something for you.
Used in the Middle Ages and Renaissance to draw the reader's eye to important parts of the page. Now can we hear it?
Yes.
All right. I'll move it back just slightly. All right. Middle Ages and Renaissance to draw the reader's eye to important parts of the page. This is called rubrication. Brazilwood was used to make one of the red inks used for rubrication. First things first, if you're going to make Brazilwood ink, you're going to need to get yourself some Brazilwood. This here is Brazilwood sawdust. Some people use Brazilwood chips. Those are just fine too. The dye we're trying to extract from the Brazilwood is called Brazilin. Brazilin is an acid-base indicator. The recipe that I'm using calls for soaking the Brazilwood overnight. Brazilwood is rather finicky, so I recommend using a non-reactive bowl to do this. The recipe calls for a new pot. I'm using plastic mixing bowl. What liquid do we soak the Brazilwood in? The recipe says you can use beer, wine, vinegar. I have chosen to use store-bought white vinegar. It is cheaper than the other ingredients, and I can honestly say no alcoholic beverages were abused in the making of this ink or video. Because Brazilwood is rather finicky, I strongly recommend using a dedicated soaking bowl or pot. Label it so it can't be mistakenly used for something else. So here we go, a container for soaking the Brazilwood overnight. As you might be able to see, that is 1 quart of vinegar. Now the directions say 1/3 of a quart of vinegar per 1 ounce of Brazilwood. That's not 1 ounce of Brazilwood, that's 3 ounces of Brazilwood. So 3 ounces of Brazilwood take 1 quart of vinegar. Dun dun dun.
That's dust.
Yeah. By the way, it is often a good idea to wear a mask. You don't have to, but then you don't get to breathe. Interestingly enough, anybody who has done cooking or baking for any amount of time knows what mistake I just made there. At the time, I wasn't very good at, I didn't understand my mistake until somebody pointed it out, and then I laughed because I know better and I made the mistake anyway. You should add your liquid to your solids, not your solids to your liquids.
Yep.
If I had that in there first and then poured in the vinegar, I wouldn't have gotten that cloud of Brazilwood dust. So recommend leave the dust, leave your Brazilwood in a spot, and then pour your vinegar or whatever you're going to be using over it. Soaking your Brazilwood overnight in vinegar makes the solution turn yellow. Pouring the Brazilwood that was soaked overnight into the pot where it can be boiled this morning. Now I'm going to need to get all of that out of there into here. And so there we are, outside, boiling Brazilwood on a camp stove. Inside is probably not doing much yet. It's only been boiling for about a minute or two, thus I can grab this safely without too much heat. You can see just the start of bubbles, not too much going on. Now the reason I'm doing this outside is that I am literally boiling vinegar and Brazilwood. And well, that creates quite a smell. But also keep in mind, vinegar is an acid, and when you boil it, it's going to go in, it's going to turn to vapors into the air, and then people breathe that in. Well, I have asthma and my daughter has asthma. We don't want to be breathing in vapors of acid. Alright, now we're starting to get more activity. That's great! The recipe from the Book of Secrets, 1596, sold under the sign of the gun, translated by a guy named Guy. No. By WP. Sorry. Well, it has to boil down to half. And well, that's going to be a while. Alright, so my alum is ready to get put in, and we're going to go ahead and put that in. Hopefully we'll be able to catch all this. Steam is not always a good thing when you're trying to video. Alright, in the alum goes. And it instantly changes the Brazilwood to red. You can see that. And you can see how the bubbles are changing. And all of a sudden it looks like it's going to a roiling boil. I haven't changed a thing except by adding the alum. The heat source is still steady. The vinegar is still coming off. Occasionally you still get a whiff even in an open area. But yeah, now you have a nice deep red. Again, this needs to keep boiling down. until about half. We're starting to see where that top level used to be, and that we're starting to get lower than that already. So this is the kind of alum that you want to use, very specifically aluminum alum. So potassium aluminum sulfate with 12H2O attached. Makes it the crystal structure. It's important to use this kind of alum because the other kinds of alums either don't work or don't work as well. This alum, however, was actually processed and made for me by the Honorable Lord Nighthawk in the Middle Kingdom. So thank you very much, Nighthawk. Still using it. The container, as you can see, has a hole in it, folks, and that just recently happened. So yes, I need to get a new container for it. We are at about 15 to 20 minutes now. As you can see, it has definitely been boiled down some. We need to go down maybe about another ½ inch before we get to half. But remember, we started this recipe with a full quart of vinegar. Some of that, of course, did get absorbed into the Brazilwood, but when I boil this down, I need to get down to about a pint, a little bit less. As you can see, this is a very low boil, but I don't know if you'll be able to catch it or not. Even at a low boil, you're still going to have stuff that bounces up and out. I haven't actually spilled any ink at this point. Don't worry, I will. But there are still splotches that are happening because this is getting boiled out, low boil, but you're still getting the drops that pop up. So be careful, pay attention. All right, so here we are at about a point where we're at roughly half the volume that we started with. It's time to turn this thing off. Boom, off. How long did it take to boil this down to about half? Hour and a half? Roughly, hour to an hour and a half is pretty typical for this, for doing a triple batch, as I did. If you're just going to make the smaller one, it takes a lot less time, understandably. Which is why I kept going a short while later, because you don't need to watch it boil for an hour and a half on a video. And the recipe calls for, once it's cool, then filter it. Well, it's going to be a while before it cools off, folks. See you then. A not so short while later, boiling vinegar takes a while to cool off, along with the Brazilwood sawdust that has been being boiled. This took about 20 more minutes to get to a safe handling temperature. Ask me how many times I did not wait and paid for it. The answer is more than once. And that's just silly. You would have thought I would have learned after the first one. A not so short while later. Boiling
I read it in the video too. I apologize.
To cool off, along with the Brazilwood sawdust that has been being boiled. This took about 20 more minutes to get to a safe handling temperature. All right, so here it is. The Brazilwood has cooled off. I can pick it up, handle it. It still feels a little warm. Don't know if that's because it's been sitting out in the sun or if it's still warm inside. But either way, it's very safe to handle. And so, as you can see inside, it's red. It's got the dredges, so it's time to come out, pour it in here. So we're going to take this beautiful hand-woven white linen and turn it red and turn it into a filter system. And the dredges have to come out because they need to get squeezed because they are also holding, of course sometimes they don't want to come out, they're also holding the Brazilwood. Oop. And they are soaked up. And this is one of those one-take things that no matter how ugly it gets, we just kind of have to get through it. So, as you can see in the end, there's not an awful lot of Brazilwood ink liquid in there. Well, a lot of it's actually in the dredges. So now we get to squeeze that out. Take it, fold up the edges and the corners. As you can see, it's a gorgeous color. And as you can see, a lot of it is actually still cut in the dredges. So we're just going to... This is where my wife laughed at me and pointed out that I was wearing a red shirt pulling red dye into a red bowl. Apparently that was not so good for showing you the color. She was right. Squeeze this. By the way, if you do this when it's too hot, it hurts. Don't do it when it's hot. It's not worth it. Yep, starting to get dribble down my arm. I don't mind dribbling down my arm for me. I mind it dribbling down the arm because it doesn't get in the bowl. It needs to get in the bowl. Everything in the bowl gets turned into ink for you guys. And then you can turn this, and that will actually corkscrew down and help get ink out, or at least liquid out. This will turn into ink in a bit when I add gum arabic. Now, the other thing you can do, like I said, as this is starting to look more orange than red, you can add a little bit of chalk to it. Okay, mortar and pestle, let's move it, see what's inside it. Okay, inside we have some white powder. That white powder could be all sorts of things. In this case, it is ground up cuttlefish bone. The recipe calls for adding chalk if you want to make the Brazilwood a little bit more red. So, I don't have any chalk. Well, a SCA time period substitute is cuttlefish bone. In this case, it's been ground up. This, however, was not ground up by me. This was ground up by my daughter, Squee. Good job, Squee.
Hi, I'm Squee, and I am grounding up cuttlefish bone. And I really, really, really like this.
And we're going to add just a touch of... She's now 13 and not that cute, but it is still, she still does a wonderful job. Well, not chalk, but we're going to add a touch of cuttlefish bone that you already watched Squee work with and grind up. And really, you don't want much more than that. You know, I don't know if you can see it or not. Remember, calcium carbonate is a base, vinegar is an acid, and that actually does bubble a little bit. So when you introduce that acid and that base together, it produces carbon dioxide. So you don't want to do that in a bottle with a narrow neck in it, because then it comes shooting out and like a volcano in those old experiments. That was a fun experience once. So we have what we have in the way of the Brazilwood. It looks like it is far less than a pint, which is often what happens. I'm just going to pour some of these bottles. I like this kind of funnel because it has the ridges on it.
Use a light.
It helps stop vapor lock. I apologize, what? All right, I'll continue. And lets the water or vinegar or whatever you use, in this case Brazilwood ink, flow through and allows air to come out at the same time. Hopefully, I won't miss too badly, but it wouldn't be the first time if I did. Oh yeah, that's looking gorgeous. And then I'm going to double check. Yep, a little drop. That happens. Double check it, and just a little bit more. Yeah, I was wrong. Okay. This is the recipe that I use to make the ink. It is from the Book of Secrets, Diverse Ways of Making Ink. Don't worry, I will give you a modern transliteration of this in just a bit. But let me read this to you. This is very typical of later time period, 16th century, 17th century types of recipes. To seethe Brazil another way. To an ounce of Brazil, take a third part of a quart of beer, wine, or vinegar. Put it in a new pot. Let it stand a night. In the morning, set it on the fire, and let it seethe till it be half consumed. Then, for every ounce of Brazil, take 2 pennyworth of alum, beaten to a powder, and as much beaten gum arabic. Sit well together, and let them seethe again. But if you desire to have it somewhat dark, then scrape a little chalk into it. When it seetheth, let it not seethe over the pot, and being cold, strain it through a cloth, and put it in a glass well stopped. Here's the modern transliteration of the recipe. Please understand that these ingredients are listed in measurements of modern American measurements or the metric system. The measurements at the time period and place where this was translated into in England around between 1590 and 1600 would not have been using these measurements or the same meaning of these measurements. So keep that in mind. That is a rabbit hole that is very interesting and complicated if you ever want to get into it. However, this recipe and these ingredients and these measurements and these modern way of doing things works just fine, as you saw in the video. So let me read this to you so you have some time. This is Brazilwood ink red. The materials you're going to be using is 1 ounce of Brazilwood, 10 2/3 fluid ounces, or 315 milliliters of vinegar. You could also use beer or wine, take your choice. 2 pennyweight, which is 3 grams of alum, 2 pennyweight, or 3 grams of gum arabic. Your tools that you're going to need are a non-reactive bowl. It says optional, but really you need one, unless you have another non-reactive container that you can use. A non-reactive pot, a non-reactive stirring implement, a filtering cloth, such as linen or cheesecloth is preferred. Coffee filters don't work. They're too slow, they overflow, they cause problems. They also filter out the gum arabic. That's bad. They also get clogged up by the gum arabic, making it hard for the ink to flow through them. Just don't use them. Procedure. Put Brazilwood into a non-reactive container. That can be your pot, it can be the bowl, whichever you want. Do understand that because we're going to add vinegar to it, it's an acid, it needs to be non-reactive to the acid. All right. Add your vinegar, beer or wine, and let soak overnight, minimum of 8 hours. Obviously, you can do it in the middle of the day if you want, but minimum of 8 hours. In a well-ventilated area, after soaking overnight, pour your solution and Brazilwood into a non-reactive pot. Stainless steel, not really a non-reactive pot for our purposes. Using a high temperature, bring the solution to a gentle seething boil. Go ahead and turn your temperature down if you need to. Just maintain it at a seething boil. Once at a seething boil, add the alum and gum arabic. Be careful not to let it boil over. You'll notice you never saw me add the gum arabic, not in the video. I prefer to add the gum arabic at the end because I have found that the gum arabic makes the bubbles stronger and therefore they don't pop as well, and that means they climb up the edge of the pot really nicely. I have found no difference between adding gum arabic later and adding gum arabic in the middle while it's hot. Do understand that if you add gum arabic when the solution is not warm, it takes longer for the gum arabic to get soaked into the ink. So just keep that in mind. If you want to put it in while it's boiling, feel free. Just understand it's going to climb the side of your pot pretty well. Reduce the volume by just over half. You want to boil it down. I have learned to do it at just over half instead of 2/2. You will get the same results, but you will get slightly more ink out of the process. Remove from heat and let cool. Strain it through a cloth in a non-reactive container. Squeeze the cloth to ensure as much liquid as possible is released. And then, of course, bottle it in an airtight container. And that is the recipe in the modern transliteration for it. I hope this has been useful to you. And yes, feel free to use chalk. It'll make it a little bit darker. It won't be a bright red, it'll be a dark red. If you add too much chalk, it'll get over to purple. And because Brazilian is that acid-base indicator, all you have to do to get it back to red is add a little bit of vinegar. It should be fine. You don't want to do that too much, obviously, but go ahead and make it happen. If you cannot get a hold of chalk, go ahead and use cuttlefish bone. Usually your local pet store will have it, especially if they have a section for birds. Go over to that section for birds. If you can't find it, just ask them for cuttlefish bone. They'll get it to you. It's cheap, it's easy, you grind it up and you use it. Well, that's the end of our video. I do hope that you have enjoyed it and that this has been instructive and useful to you. And I really do hope that sometime you get a chance to make your own. Thank you very much. Hello. Pennyweight. How much is a pennyweight? So there's an argument over how much is a pennyweight. And here's the fun part when it comes to measurements. When we in the area that we study, in the time period that we study, measurements were not always codified and therefore not standardized. And different kingdoms, different places had the same measurement, but it didn't mean the same thing. This is true up through the modern time period in many ways. For example, we all say Napoleon was short because he was 5'7". Yet he was 5'7" French inches. He was almost 6 foot tall in English measurements. So he really wasn't that short. But the English didn't care, and it was a great way to make fun of Napoleon. And so measurements can be problematic. A pennyweight in the time period that this came from turns out was 1.2 grams, not 1.5. So 2 penny would be 2.4 grams. I don't know about you, but I don't have a scale that goes to grams. Well, actually I do now, but at the time I didn't. And that's a very finicky number. So if you get 2 to 3 grams on there, you're fine. You're not going to kill it by overdoing it, and you're not going to kill it by a slight underdo. It'll be fine. But yeah, pennyweight is still an actual measurement. To this day, it's just not used by most people for obvious reasons. So yeah. So how much alum went into the mixture is a question. So remember I was making a triple batch. I said 2.5 grams for a pennyweight, which was wrong, I found out. So it really should have been 2.4. Pardon me, should have been, for 2 pennyweight, should have been 2.4. And so it was 3 ounces, sorry, 3 grams is what it said. So I ended up using 9 grams of alum is what went into that mixture because it was a triple batch. It should have been like 7.2. Obviously it worked. It made a good ink. So sometimes there are mistakes that don't matter and mistakes that do, and that was one that worked out okay. So I'm going to call it one that didn't matter. People always, one of the questions I get the most from people is they'll show me their ink, they'll write with it, it looks like a good ink, and they'll go, did I make it right? And I'm like, you can write with it. It looks the way it's supposed to. It's a good ink. There is different qualities of ink, and I'll get into that real quick, and I'll answer some other questions real quick as well. It's like making a bench. You get 2 logs, a plank of wood, you set it down, you've made a bench. Is it a good quality bench? Well, you can sit on it, it's a bench. But it's, a better quality bench might be something that uses 3 slats of wood, has, gorgeous ironwork on it, and has been painted and so on and so forth. That's a better quality bench. Still a bench. And so ink does have different qualities to it. And that was one of the hardest part about my path was getting people to understand that there's low quality and high quality ink, and it matters. So that's an interesting question. The question is, do you think the dregs would mold down enough to make paint? I've never tried. Now, Brazilwood can be made into paint. It's not going to be light fast. So it's good for book stuff, but it's not going to be good for something that's going to hang on the wall. I think it's possible. I honestly do, considering, especially if you're using the sawdust, you're going to have to mull it down, like you said. I think it would be better to use the cloth. I forget what those are called all of a sudden, but there are a period way of storing paint was to make the dye or paint, dip cloth into it, a cloth tab into it, and then when you wanted to use it, you'd take that cloth tab and you'd put it down on your palette or in a little bowl, and you'd add water to it, and then it would come back up. Clothlet, yes, thank you. And so I think it would be a better way to do it would be to do that. Nonetheless, that I think it'd be worth trying. I've never tried. I always like the questions I get because it gives me a new rabbit hole to go down. Because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. And by the way, I've been making ink since 2006. And it's now 2025, 2026, so it's been almost 20 years. Come April, it will be. And if you're coming up with questions for things I didn't think of, that tells you that there's still so much left that can be done. So if this is something you want to do, there's so much that's still left to do. So is Brazilwood a new wood, a new world wood? In other words, North American, South American. Was it a different wood used before Europe had access to the New World? Actually, no. Fascinatingly, Brazilwood was known very long time. It came from sections of the Indian subcontinent, areas that we would think of as Pakistan, and just a little bit west of Pakistan and a little bit east of Pakistan. And that area was Brazilwood. So when they got to the New World, they found logwood. Logwood is a New World wood. It is a New World thing. And it has a different color palette to it, but it also can be made of different colors. And in fact, it started to give Brazilwood a competition. And depending on where you were, and how powerful your particular guild was, logwood would get banned from being used in official documents for various made-up reasons. But yeah, so Brazilwood is definitely an old world wood. The country of Brazil is named after the wood, not the other way around. Brazil is named after Brazilwood because there was so much there. That's what the Portuguese did when they got there. They're like, wow, that's a lot of Brazilwood. Called the place Brazil. So that's how that worked. And so, yeah, definitely it's an old world one, and they've had access to it for, whether they knew it or not, thousands of years. Interesting thing about trade routes is that trade routes have been going on longer than history. We have found out in the last 20 years. So yeah, that answers that one. Cuttlefish bone can come from pet stores in the bird section, less pricey from pet stores. Absolutely. Yeah, just like I said in the video. So any other questions? Anything specific? Oh, yeah, I have different ways of Brazilwood also. Did you say how you got the Brazilwood sawdust? No, I didn't. Do you have to make it yourself? Sometimes. In this case, I didn't. I will tell you where I got it from in a minute. Well, I'll try to tell you where I got it from in a minute. Or was I able to buy it from a specialty wood company? No. I bought it from a bow making company. And when I say bow, I'm talking about the bows that go with a violin, because they like to use Brazilwood to make those bows. And so when they do that, you get sawdust. And so it's called ethically sourced. Brazilwood, I think we're another 10 years away from it not being, but currently this kind of Brazilwood that makes the red stuff really, really well. There's different, Brazilwood it's like oak trees. There's more than one kind. But the one that was used for dye making, the favored one, was becoming rare, and it's a hardwood. So it takes a very long time to grow groves. As soon as they realized what the problem was, they started growing them. And then 10 years ago, they said it would take 20 years. So we have another 10 years of that kind of thing still going on. So I like to get my Brazilwood as sawdust. First of all, one of the things that you learn in chemistry class is more surface area equals more reaction. So the smaller the particles, the more reaction is going to happen, the faster it's going to come out of solution, or into solution. Sorry. So I just like using the sawdust for that purpose. But yeah, you can get a block of sawwood, wow, a block of Brazilwood, and turn it and just use a rasp or use a file or even sandpaper and make your own. Or you can just soak it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It's how much time do you have to give the project. The smaller the pieces, the less time. The bigger the pieces, the more time. So unfortunately, the bow company that I was buying it from is no longer in business. So I can't anymore get it from them. Griffin Dye Works was selling it for a while. They're a Scadian owned, Scadian run site. Trying to think of anybody else right now. Yeah, it's the only one that comes to mind, but I bought it from them as well. So, yeah. And how much ink did I get from a triple batch or a single batch? That triple batch that you saw, I think I got 7 bottles from it. 7 1.5 ounce bottles. So 10 and a half ounces, fluid ounces, not weight ounces, fluid ounces, is what I got from a quart when I started off. A pint is 2 cups. A cup is 8 ounces. So a pint is 16. A quart is 32 ounces. I went from 32 ounces to 10, 12, something like that. Anyway, you know what it was. I already told you, I just forgotten. 10.5, that's what it was.
You mentioned that it's not color fast. So does it just get paler red until it disappears, or?
So I'll answer your question, and to be technically correct, it's not light fast. It is color fast. And yeah, it'll fade. It'll turn pink. It'll go translucent, and eventually just dies. It's just not there anymore. And it depends on how north or south you live from the equator. But the longer your days, the faster it'll happen. The shorter your days, the longer time it'll take. But yeah, when I did my test and I was in Chicago at the time, it took a month for it to disappear, just leaving it in a window. Close it, you do the same test at the same time. You take a piece of paper, you close it, you stick it in a dark place, and you compare it, and you're like, wow, that's still vibrant. So it's not light fast at all. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Trying to see if I missed any. It looks like I addressed. Oh, how many? No, got that one. Oh, could you dye cloth with this? Yes, you can. I am not a cloth dyer. There are things that need to happen to set the dye. But again, remember, it's not light fast. So if that cloth or fabric gets worn out into light areas where there's a lot of light, it's going to fade pretty quickly. So, but yes, you can dye stuff with it. Absolutely. Oh, pardon me. Somebody put a link to YouTube, and I think that was mine. Was that my YouTube video? Yes, it is. All right. Sorry, I was just testing that. And my screen went black for some reason. There we are. Sorry about that. Okay. Looks like I answered all the questions in chat. So if there's no other questions, we can... the Woolery has Brazilwood sawdust for dyeing. All right. And there's a link in the chat if you would like to go there and take a look at what they have. I have no idea what a current reasonable price is. I haven't made Brazilwood ink in about 3 years. Well, if there aren't any other questions, let's go. We can go ahead and end the official portion of the class and go on into discussing all scribal stuff or being more informal.
Well, I got one quick one. Does the sawdust lose color, or is it light fast, or just the dye?
It's a good question, and I haven't officially tested it. When I have Brazilwood sawdust, I keep it in the bag and I stick it in a box and I stick it someplace cool because I don't know and I don't want to take the chance. So I'm just using best practices and just keep it in a dark spot because I don't know, and it quite possibly could. And at $19 for 100 grams, which is what it costs at the Woolery, I don't know. It's like, do I have the money to run that test and not make ink out of it? Well, for a very long time, the answer to that was absolutely no. These days, I'm doing a little bit better, so I might want to try and do that. Good question.
Thank you so much for a great class, Ian, and I will go ahead and stop the recording if everybody's got their questions in.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm always happy to do it.